Interpreting one rock art image is not like reading a word. It's like reading a symphony.
Is it possible to read the rocks? Of course it is. But there's something in our psychology and in our conditioning that thinks that rock art, petroglyphs, pictographs, geoglyphs, these kinds of things should be like reading a book. And that's not the nature of it. Can you read the rocks? You can read the rocks. Is it like reading a book? Absolutely not. An ideogram is a symbol that represents a word or a concept. Like kanji, for example, in Japan. A symbol that means an exact meaning. That's not the nature of reading the rocks in the Native American world. When you're reading the rocks, what you're doing is you're looking at an image, you've learned about the culture, you place that image within the context of the culture's stories, you place that image within the context of its setting, and then you understand the philosophy behind the image. You can't always do this. It's not always possible. But in many cases, and especially in the more modern iterations, like in the Pueblo culture, which is very, very recent in historic times, and there are still living, vibrant tribes that know their images and know their stories, who can tell you what the meaning of these are. It's not that mysterious. But even in older cultures, you can, ethnographers have done a great job with some people in collecting the stories and collecting the rituals and the lifeways that enable us to make interpretations of what was happening on the rocks. Again, not always, but it is possible. It just takes study. It's not a matter of looking at an image and saying, that means cat. Usually an image will mean something like, say for example, an image of a sunburst. That, depending on the context and depending on the people, could have a range of meanings. From just one example of a meaning it could have is the giver of all life. But it depends on the people who have made that image. It depends on where that image is placed. It depends on which direction it faces. It depends on what other images are around it. Many, many factors. If you take the time to learn these factors and you take the time to learn these cultures, which does not happen overnight, yes, you can read the rocks.
Here's a general example taken from the book called Topomvany, which is about the Pulabayou region of Arizona. In order to begin reading this panel, you first have to take into account Puebloan ideology and Hopi mythology. Once you've done that, you can understand that Tawa, it says Tawa, the sun god, is believed to pick up the people's wishes and desires in the form of prayer sticks or prayer feathers as he begins his diurnal journey across the sky. Because prayer items are vulnerable to the elements, animals, and other forces, it may have been considered more effective to engrave one's prayer on a rock surface exposed to the celestial divinity. Traveling across the land, the sun sweeps over the petroglyphic prayer on a daily basis and is thereby compelled to receive the supplicant's message each day anew. And then, of course, from there, what you do is you dial down into the Puebloan ideology and, in this case, the Hopi mythology to understand what each of these images on the rock mean in this context. And when you read it with the direction of the sun, you know how to read that rock.